for Yang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds!
Now with this campaign, bang, dang, it's and Drew, come roll with the Yang Gang.
Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! The special corona.
Oh, Andrew, we lost sound.
Oh, really? You want me to do that again?
Yeah, man. No, we gotta do it. We gotta do it again. Hello, nerds!
Hello, nerds! Welcome to the coronavirus edition.
The work from home edition of Nerds for Yang. My brother.
The big questions on
It
all
is-
of our minds.
It is.
Is the call video or audio? And what do I wear if it is video?
Dude, I love that you had to retire the blazer and the blue shirt. I don't recognize you.
Well, I'm actually going to put on the blazer and the blue shirt a little bit later today for CNN interview that will also be done from home. But I decided not to get dressed up for you, Tom, and I figured this was like, you know, like if there's ever a time where we were just going to talk as human beings, it would probably be pandemic season.
That's right, dude. If you can't be casual on Nerds for Yang, where can you be casual?
Exactly. That was my thinking.
All right. So look, I know we've got limited time, and we got a lot to talk about. I wanted to divide it into three sections. The first section is definitely want to talk about the campaign, the Yang 2020 campaign, before Iowa, after New Hampshire. Got to talk about the Biden endorsement. So that's going to be a good 15 minutes. Then we'll talk about HumanityForward, what the strategy is, like what the kind of initial campaign or activities will be, how people can get involved.
The new campaign just today.
Exactly.
Coronavirus Relief Fund. So thank you to everyone who's supporting.
So we're definitely going to talk about that for about 10 minutes. Then it would be kind of cool. We have to talk about the virus and sort of your take on what you think, how you think we're handling it, and how you might handle it if you were in the Oval. And then we'll leave 5-10 minutes for fan questions. And then you get we'll let you go because I know you're like a big primetime TV guy now.
Well, that's not my primary set of activities. I mean, right now I'm running around trying to get HumanityForward on the right track around obviously universal basic income, but also some other things we're working on. So yeah, it's not like I just wait around for TV cameras. I mean, I'm more of an operator, happily. But yeah, thank you. I mean, it's good to be back in an operator's chair because running for president is not very operational.
Yeah, indeed. I remember you talked about that in one of our first interviews where you're like, well, it's not quite like running a company or organization. You're as a candidate, it's a different type of role, let's just say. So speaking of the campaign, I guess first question is like, what do you think happened with the Yang 2020 campaign?
I think that we accomplished tremendous things, and it's being borne out right now. I mean, we genuinely may have changed the course of history with the campaign. But what happened was we were maxing out in terms of energy and enthusiasm and resources and volunteers on the ground in Iowa. And certainly everything leading up to February 3rd, the big question was how many Iowans were we going to get on board? Mm-hmm. And incredibly grateful to everyone who went to Iowa in particular and knocked on doors and volunteered. And because of their efforts and everyone's efforts and all of the resources we put into TV advertising and the rest of it, we were very real in Iowa. We got 5% of the vote. And I remember saying to someone, I need 40,000 Iowans to eradicate poverty. and we got something like 9 or 10,000. And so in a way, it's actually like pretty awesome where we got like 25% of the way to the eradication of poverty. But in electoral reality, if you get 5% of caucus goers in Iowa, you have to be above 15% to be viable in a particular district. And so 5% actually got shrunk to something like 1% of delegates, which then allowed the press to say 1%. And then you were like, well, you know, like that's technically correct. And like, you know, if you're looking at delegates, but we kind of did better than that. And so there was a lot of energy. And then, of course, Iowa was a fiasco, you know, where like, results weren't really reported in a prompt way, and the chair had to step down and all sorts of like problems. So I think we had like this wave that was cresting, and then it hit Iowa, and then we really had like a significant like pitfall or trouble spot. And then from there wasn't much time to do anything but just get to New Hampshire and then try and build back up. And so to me, everyone knows watching this, like I was on a bus for 17 days in Iowa, just conducting town halls and trying to get in front of people. And when we looked at the voter district data after the fact, we performed much more strongly in places where the bus stopped. So that's good. You know, at least it makes you feel like, well, when you went there, like things got better in that place. But I'll tell you, Tom, I went to a caucus location in West Des Moines the night of February 3rd. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to go well for us. Because you walked in there and it was like, it was not Yang Gang, let's put it that way. There was like this very, very small set of Yang Gang. And then it was like a lot of suburban Des Moines voters who were there for Pete or Elizabeth or Bernie or Joe and like a smattering of Amy. And I was like, woo, like these are not our people at all. And like I gave like a talk, and by the time I gave the talk, then like it was very well received. People were happy to see me, obviously, because you know having one of the candidates there. But I talked to Evelyn about it too, and Evelyn went to a caucus site in another part of that area, and she was like, "Wow, was the caucus process terrible for Yang Gang?" Because the leader, the district captain in Evelyn's district, was this introverted Asian guy, like college kid. And when it was his turn to speak, like it was clearly like something that he had to really gird himself for. And then that he managed to like get it done. But like there was something where the caucus process actually favors people with like a high degree of extroversion, you know, like comfort in like a gym.
Yeah.
So like the caucus process not great for us. But we went straight from there to New Hampshire, and we had like a relatively brief period to try and build back up. And you know, like the reality on the ground in New Hampshire, we ended up performing a little bit worse there than we did in Iowa. And leading into that time, my team was saying, it's like, look, if we don't put up some kind of whopping double-digit number in New Hampshire and get some delegates, it's going to be, you know, a really rough path moving forward. So what they tried to prepare me for was that if we didn't put up some whopping result, like maybe we should consider suspending, which the first time I heard it was very new to me, because I was like, what do you mean? Like, we're going to be at this for weeks or months. And then they managed to convince me that if we didn't put up a massive result in New Hampshire, that everything thereafter was going to end up being like donor money, people's time, people's energy, like that it was going to be not well spent. And I have to say that was a very tough realization, because you're just going full steam ahead, and you feel all this energy behind you.
Yeah.
And then literally something like 5 days later, like the team's sitting you down being like, hey, FYI, if we don't get to here, then like we might need to consider like making this dramatic end. Yeah, like so that's what I was hearing maybe like 2 days before New Hampshire voted, which is that if we didn't have a whopping result, that we might have to suspend, or not have to. I mean, everyone was like, "It's up to you," but here are the variables, and this is what we think, and this is what we advise. Frankly, what some of them just said, like, "Look, we advise X if you don't hit Y."
I have a follow-up question on that. Before we go on to it, I do need to say that I'm sure you and I both appreciate that that precinct guy that did his best in that gym. Probably was really tough for him to give that presentation. So I just wanted to clarify. I'm sure you're appreciative of what he did. The guy in Iowa and Evelyn's.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Like I'm deeply appreciative and felt for him. It's just like I was just like, Evelyn told me the story in part just to say like this process was not
right
something that like set us up or our people up for maximal comfort or success. But yeah, of course I appreciate the heck out of that guy. I mean, I was that guy, I think.
Yeah, no, I can empathize with him as well.
Yeah.
Do you think like if the next time around, if there will be one, and I really hope there will be one, is the learning that like you have to be really strategic about prepping the captains and practice presentations and selection, like, or what do you think is the learning from Iowa if you had to do it again?
I mean, to be very clear, most everyone who showed up at that gym knew who they were voting for, and it's not like that presentation was gonna all of a sudden like sway.
I'm switching.
It's like you go to the Hollywood script, and it's like the gym. It's like, oh my god, like
that's right.
So that was not the main variable. What I realized the main variable was, and what actually the numbers bore out, was that the folks in Iowa and New Hampshire grew to know me, grew to like me, but they did not feel like they had permission to vote for me as president of the United States. That they didn't have that permission structure because in many ways, frankly, like the press narrative that had led up did not cast me as a serious contender. And so what we need to do really is not the work that night, but it's the work like months before, years before, actually, in our case, is to set me up as a credible contender for the White House, because it turns out, in terms of people's like opinion of me, like in terms of my having various favorable attributes, I was top of the scale among the candidates for most all of them in terms of like cares about me, like has the right values, has the right policies. Like I was very high on every rating except for does he have the experience to be president of the United States? And on that one, I was very low. And so for many people, they just didn't feel like they had permission to make me commander in chief. And this is a climate or a time when people felt like a lot of trepidation about who they put forward against Trump. Like that, you can still see it, where people were like, we need to make sure and beat Trump, and we can't really take risks with this nominee. And so what the big threshold I'd have to get to is like all of those suburban voters in West Des Moines would have had to feel like, yeah, Andrew Yang could and should be president for weeks, months leading up. And it's not even necessarily like, ooh, I'm going to vote for him, but that like everyone's completely allowed to vote for Andrew Yang. Like this is not like a, an out there move to vote for Andrew Yang. In terms of, and if you look at it from a startup perspective or a product perspective, you have like the early adopters, which frankly, most all of the Yang Gang essentially are in this context. And then you have early mainstream and like mainstream and then late mainstream. And the truth is that we never quite penetrated the mainstream of voter context and consideration for just that run-of-the-mill Democrat in Iowa or New Hampshire where they were like, who am I going to vote for? These are all like, fine conventional candidates. I was still kind of like the out there marginal candidate by the time voting kicked off in both Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah, I feel you. I guess we struggled to cross the chasm, as they say in technology product adoption, right? And one thing that I guess occurred to a lot of us was like, even when you looked at the data for Bernie versus Biden, there are a lot of people who actually will say, Bernie, I agree with him on more issues, but I'm still going to vote for Biden. I think it's because of this year. It's all about who they think is the most credible against Trump. So it wasn't just you. I think the whole field basically lost to kind of the more safe, what was considered the safe choice.
Yeah, completely.
So let me
that was talk about the dynamic. And if I were to run again, a lot of what I need to do during this time is become safe. Really.
Yeah. And seeing you on CNN a lot makes you more familiar to a lot of people now. So hopefully, maybe someday down the road, that'll come in handy. One thing, question.
And I confess that was part of the calculation. Is like, I think if you just see someone and feel comfortable with them, then it becomes like, sure, that person's safe. Like they seem very reasonable.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I know that guy. He's in my living room every couple days. Yeah, he says interesting things. I mean, it's ironic how I'm sure your campaign was fighting tooth and nail to get airtime on CNN, and now they're paying you. It's flipped.
Yeah, it was. I was surprised to get a call from them, and then even when I got a call from them, I was like, well, this would be a nice way to stay public and relevant. Yeah, so I was surprised, but it is funny.
Yeah, it's crazy world. Let me ask you this question from Verily, who is saying, do you think it would have made a difference if you stayed till South Carolina? I was talking to your man Jermaine Johnson just a few days ago on the Nerds channel, and he was pretty. Of course, every state sort of all head of the state office is optimistic, but I think he felt like there was a good shot for your message in South Carolina, and certainly it's not like anyone other than Biden did well there. Do you ever wonder if you had hung on till South Carolina or through Super Tuesday, you think anything would have been different, or you think you got out suspended at the optimal time?
So when I was in New Hampshire, I was looking ahead at the map and I was looking at what the polling suggested. And so in Nevada, our best estimate, and we had internal data too, our best estimate was that the polls in Nevada were more or less accurate, and that I was somewhere in the mid-single digits. Now, Nevada is also a caucus like Iowa. So if you're not at 15% in a particular district, you get zeroed out. So we thought it was likely to be a situation where I wound up on the upside, let's call it 5 to 7%, but then wound up with like 1% of delegates and then was completely ignored again. Like it would have been like another like Iowa situation. In South Carolina, like the numbers looked very similar. So like if I thought I was going to get delegates in either of those states, I would have stuck around. Because if you get delegates, then at least at that time, then and I'd love to have a delegate to the DNC convention, like that would have been great. But it did not look, the numbers were not rosy in the upcoming races. There was nothing I could point to and say, ooh, I'm going to win that place or get above 15% in that place. If I thought I was going to, I would have stayed. But the numbers said that I was going to do similarly in Nevada and South Carolina as I did in Iowa.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Andrew, some folks are wondering if it's possible for you to set your phone on a stationary object. it's a little.
You don't like the shaky cam gang? You don't like this? Just kidding. You know, I ought to have more of a professional setup here, but all I will do is pledge to try to minimize movement. Let's
All
see
right.
how my kung fu technique is. We'll
All
try
right,
that.
man. All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so let me ask you this: if we talked a little bit about doing it all over again, what you would do differently, and sort of being more familiar, having more kind of runway for people to get to know you. Are there other things that you sort of will take away with you for future efforts?
Now, I did not realize just how powerful the media was in shaping the narratives of the race. And when I learned over time how it functions, someone said to me that you should have met with more of like the 200 or so DC Beltway journalists and opinion makers beforehand, because when I declared, obviously no one knew who I was. And even throughout the race, most of them still did not actually ever sit down with me. And so there was like a constant, who the heck is this guy dynamic that built up, or actually didn't build up, it was always there. And so if there's one thing I could have done over again that would have enhanced our chances of success, it would have been to spend time with more of those 200 journalists and opinion leaders earlier on. And I frankly still have not sat down with most of them. And so, you know, that would be the groundwork you would lay for another race that I think would be a big difference maker. I actually did not know that those people were as influential and powerful as they are. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you about the endorsement of Biden. How did that, what was the calculation there? I mean, we all know you supported Bernie back in the last time around in 16, and Biden didn't support UBI. So I know you caught a lot of flack for endorsing Biden from some in the Yang Gang. So curious, like, what was that decision process like?
Yeah, so Joe called me the week prior, and we talked about it. And I told him that I appreciated the call, but that I was going to try and let the voters speak, let the process play out, because I thought that was the right approach. And I endorsed Joe after he won Michigan, and I thought that essentially the voters had spoken. And at that point, the race looked to me like a formality. And so at that point, I thought, well, Joe is the presumptive nominee. I've always said that I'm going to get behind the nominee. So I should do this now, because if I just sit it out and like wait for another 2, 3, 4 weeks for it to be even more clear, then I essentially would have done nothing. And at least this way I can help move the process forward and help bring people together. I will also say that I have a good relationship with Joe, have had numerous conversations about him, with him about the problems I was most concerned about, around automation and the fourth industrial revolution. He has called me repeatedly, and like he's someone I can work with very straightforwardly. So to me, this is me living up to what I always said I'd do, which is support the nominee. At the time I made the endorsement, I thought that it was clear that Joe was going to be the nominee. That's even more clear today. And so I thought I'd at least do what I could to help unify the party and bring people together sooner rather than later.
What do you have to say what would you say to the folks who, I mean, I noticed some people took it really tough. Some people really were very sad that you endorsed Biden. And I think their argument was, hey, if you're going for all these really kind of like innovative proposals and policies and new ways of thinking about things, the next name that comes to mind is not often Joe Biden. And so, yeah. What would you say to these folks who are still a little like tender from that endorsement and still trying to process it?
Well, I would say that I consider myself very pragmatic and effective. And the reality is, right now, the two most likely people to be our next president are Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And we have to influence the folks who are actually in the seat if we're going to get what we want done accomplished. And it's better to have a seat at the table with the president and someone that maybe needs a little bit more urging or cajoling than to be nowhere near that seat and have the ability to tell yourself that you were very, very consistent in terms of like your message, but that you weren't willing to move yourself in a way that would actually get you in your own mind closer to a point where you could get more things done. So that's what I would say. I mean, I don't know if that's helpful, but to me, the goal is to get universal basic income passed, and it's much easier to do that if you have the ability to like work with different sorts of people, even people that you might not agree with as much initially, particularly if they're going to end up being the thing that stands between your country and Donald Trump's reelection. And I like Joe. Joe has been, I mean, like, stuff happens backstage. Like, Bernie likes Joe too. It's like Joe's actually a really decent, likable human in private. I don't know if he comes across like that, in public, but he's a good man. Like, I'll be happy to see him beat Trump in the fall if that's the way it plays out.
Right on. Well, yeah, just so you know, Varoom out there, he says he's with you all the way, and he's ready for 2024. So I think a lot of us are keeping our powder dry. But I do want to switch gears a little bit. Fred the Felon says you need a seat at the table or you're going to be on the menu. So I think we're a lot of pragmatic agreement with you there. One thing that I also wanted to call out was, someone wants you to come up to Canada. I guess traveling is a little out of the question for a little while, but have you thought about spreading your message internationally? Because a lot of Nerds for Yang actually are not, maybe 10% of our audience is actually in Europe and Canada and Australia, who just think you talk a lot of sense. Have you thought about?
I would enjoy that. I would love to get up to Canada. I would love to go to Europe. I'd love to go to other parts of the world. Obviously, while I was running, that was not in the cards. And now, if we were not all on lockdown, I would love to. I mean, I really appreciated people from other parts of the world that got excited about me in my campaign. On the very, very high side, I believe we can bring not just this country together, but really the entire world in the right direction. And one of the jokes I told on the trail was, if America gets its act together and passes universal basic income, half a dozen other countries will follow suit immediately, because they'll be like, we can't let the U.S. be more progressive than us. I mean, that's not acceptable.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, I want to talk about Humanity Forward. I just want to say that John Lee Hilton says that he couldn't have his normal 21st birthday because of the virus stuff. So he had a Yang themed party with a few friends, and he just wanted to let you know that you're still having impact on him on his most important day of the year.
Oh, well, thank you, man. 21st birthday is a big deal. You're legal now. You can actually experience alcohol.
It would be the first time, I'm sure, for him.
Yeah, the first time. What can you do when you're 21? Gambling, it's 18, right?
Yes. I think it's just drinking. It's just you get to use your real ID.
And then 4 years from now, you can rent a car. I mean, that was another threshold.
All right, let's talk about Humanity Forward.
Happy 21st birthday.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Jonah. So Humanity Forward, a lot of people were really like waiting with breathless anticipation about what you were going to do next. And tell us about what the organization's about and what you're up to.
Gladly. So Humanity Forward is, to me, the logical next step for all of the energy and people who are excited about the campaign, which is how can we get our goals accomplished when you're not running for president in that moment, or you don't have like a race immediately in front of you. So we get to do a lot of the things that we did on the campaign anyway, and hopefully start actually supporting local candidates in their races, which we haven't done as much as I want to. We were supposed to have an announcement about that this week, but coronavirus ended up taking precedence. So number one is supporting various candidates who are aligned with universal basic income and human-centered economy and other policies. Number two is content and telling the stories and just trying to open hearts and minds and move people along. Number three is fighting for data as a property right. And we're working on something right now that we think can actually help activate our data property rights in real time. Like not, hey, you should pass these laws, but hey, we actually can get this done as we speak. And demonstrating our policies in real life. Obviously, universal basic income is the most prominent. So there are all these exciting things. Like, just earlier today, I was looking at graphics for the new podcast, which we are entitling Yang Speaks. I hope people like that. And obviously, like there were times on the trail where we were like, ooh, we should have a podcast, but you don't have any bandwidth or time.
Yeah.
When you're on the trail, like you're just, running into the coffee shop or like running into, to speak, you're not like getting coffee. It's like there was a coffee shop in New Hampshire. So now we can do the things that we wanted to do, but didn't have the opportunity, and can do them independent of the political cycle. Now, obviously, the coronavirus has changed a lot of things. I mean, it looks like we might pass some version of cash relief or basic income next week, and people are suffering all over the country, not just having, it's really nightmarish. Like the stories of what's happening to families in the US, it's like a waking nightmare if you look at it from the perspective of millions of Americans who right now have like complete uncertainty and anxiety about their future, complete anxiety about how they're going to feed their families next month. Like it's a disaster. And so in this context, I thought that we were going to give money away and use it as like a prod to say, look, this is what our government should be doing. But with the discussion of this week, now they're already there. Like it seems like, we're going to be getting checks. But we still need to just get money into people's hands as quickly as possible. So we've committed $1 million plus to working families. And obviously $1 million, you have to focus it somewhat. So we have identified 1,000 working poor families in the Bronx. And we chose the Bronx because it's an area that's going to be particularly hard hit, given that many of those people work in service industries that are shutting down. And it's also in the most densely populated area in the United States. So if there's any place you'd want to give people a bit of breathing room and the ability to stay home, or like not have to be concerned about where they're going to get their next meal, you would choose someplace like the Bronx. So we're committing $1 million immediately, but we're also giving money away on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And we're also partnering with One Fair Wage, which is an organization that's set up a relief fund for tipped workers who are primarily restaurant workers who've all lost their jobs over the last number of days. So those are the relief efforts we're engaged in right now. And if you want to donate, 100% of every dollar you donate will go directly into the hands of a struggling American family. There are no fees outside of, if you use a particular, I think if you used Act Blue, then maybe they take 1% or something like that. But 100% of every dollar you give us is going to just go into someone's hands. And we thought that this was necessary on several levels. Number one, we're in crisis mode and we just need to help our people as quickly as possible. Number two, we have to show our government that this is the right approach, that cash will work better than anything else. So those are the projects that we're working on right now. The relief fund, we will help local candidates like Jermaine as soon as we can. I would love to have some Yang Gang legislators around the country. It's so fun that way. The fact that there are people that are running on basic income and other elements of the platform. So that's what Humanity Forward is working on right now. And we should have announcements on the data side too, sometime in the next number of weeks. I'm really excited about the organization and everything we're doing. It's great, and also I get to operate more instead of just being a talking head. So that's fun too.
Awesome. Speaking of people running, I've interviewed a number of folks on this show running for Congress on the Freedom Dividend. And a lot of them would love to get your endorsement. And I'm wondering, how are you thinking about how involved you are with those campaigns versus obviously like the corona relief stuff? And obviously you can't endorse everybody who's just pro UBI, but you do have a big voice and ability to kind of shine attention on candidates. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I've wanted to get behind these candidates as quickly as possible, and we would have started doing so this week if not for coronavirus relief. So we have like a list going, and the plan is to have a bit of like a questionnaire about their stances on particular things. Nothing onerous, because I hate like onerous processes. Like 3 simple questions, and then have a brief phone call with them, figure out what they're about. And then also, and this might strike people the wrong way, but we also have to figure out the context of their race, like whether they're one of like a bunch of candidates, whether they're running against someone that that people uniformly dislike, or whether there's someone that is running against them that's actually like pretty okay, so there is going to be some pragmatism attached to that too, where like it's not going to be helpful for us to just support everyone who supports universal basic income in races that aren't going to be and we don't need to win everything. I mean, obviously you're going to probably not win most things, but we just, even if we have a loss, we want them to be productive losses. Like my campaign, like technically I obviously lost, but I think most everyone believes it was a highly productive loss.
Absolutely.
So in the next number of days, hopefully we'll have like a fairly straightforward process up at Humanity Forward. And I'm not a big process guy. Like most of the people who are running, like we already know about and they've been in touch, or we've like DM'd or something like that. But we do want to help. Like I love the people who are running on the these ideas. Like I see them and instinctively want to help, and I know others in the Yang Gang also want to help. So we definitely should help. Like that's something I'm really excited about. I will say the first person that we're going to officially endorse, and he's going to have company very, very soon, is Jermaine Johnson in South Carolina. He's running for state rep, 80th district. He's a great guy, great candidate, and I think he's got a great chance of winning. And we're going to do everything we can to get him in office.
Yeah, I love Jermaine in general, and I also love the fact that he's going for a very achievable outcome. He's not trying to become, a senator on his first try, and he's going for the state house, and he's going after someone who's been in the role for a long, long, long time, and maybe the voters are ready for some fresh ideas. So agree with you. It's been very exciting seeing Jermaine kind of get going. Now, I know we're running short on time, so I want to get to some fan questions. Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So Capitalism is Dying wants to know, is it true that you have to sign a contract promising to endorse the nominee in order to run as a Democrat?
There is some kind of pledge the DNC has you sign. And the verbiage is not that dissimilar from what you're suggesting. Is there some kind of enforcement mechanism? Like, I don't know, but there were various things that the DNC wanted you to commit to, and I believe supporting the eventual nominee was one of them. There were other things too, like no participating in unsanctioned debates, no doing this, no doing that.
Got it. Mark Klockow wants to just say he wants to stress how much you've done and to jumpstart his freelance career in photography. He wants to thank Zach Eric for welcoming him with open arms, and he can't wait to see you soon. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. Nueva Bestia wants to know, could you give us an expectation versus reality on establishment, mainstream media, and the election process? What you thought before versus now?
Well, the most stunning thing to me was when I like eventually said I'm not going to go on MSNBC, and then instead of them saying like, yeah, we might have messed up a little bit on this coverage, they just like doubled down on like,
Yeah.
like I was shocked by that. I was like, I thought any professional journalist. Sorry about the movement, everyone.
That's okay.
That they would say like, because it's like you look up and say like, yeah, mistakes were made, like they clearly made a series of mistakes that were
verifiable.
Verifiable. And so the fact that they just were like, no, we've got this point of view and we're going to stick to it, I was like, oh my gosh, like I wouldn't have expected that in a million years. So that was a surprise. The personal dynamics being so important also was a surprise, where legitimately, I'd say there are a couple dozen journalists where if they are trying to suppress your message, they can actually do a pretty good job of it. And if they try and make you look good, they can do a pretty good job of that too. I genuinely did not know that's the way it worked. I thought that there was like a much higher degree of objectivity. So yeah, those were some really enormous learnings. Yeah, a lot of it really was the media, I'd say. Like I just learned a lot. Now apparently I'm a member of the media. I will say also as a member of the media, and I see online there's some scuttlebutt about somehow like am I being forced to do or say certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that like I get very, very little guidance from CNN as to what I'm going to say at any I just like scribble notes and then share them more or less. Like there's not much guidance in terms of words in your mouth, because I see some of that stuff where like they think that they're like that you have certain things you have to say. There's been none of that.
Yeah, there was a lot of discussion about how at one point you said something positive about Tulsi, and then like they dragged you off the set or you disappeared.
Yeah, it was just like that where like I said something positive about Tulsi and then I was scheduled to leave immediately after.
Hit the eject button.
Yeah, so then like I saw the conspiracy stuff and I was like, they actually just told me I was leaving early that day. And then I said something nice about Tulsi and it just happened to be the last thing I said. Yeah, that's a good example. That's a good example.
Yeah. All right, Sumit wants to know if you've read Sapiens. I'm guessing yes, but I don't know. Maybe you haven't.
Yeah, I've read Sapiens. Great book. Also Homo Deus. And 21 Problems of the 21st Century.
Well, that's like right up your alley. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like me and Yuval are simpatico and aligned on many things. Though he gets a little bit more negative than I do, and his time scale tends to advance faster. Like I'm worried about today and tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Are you thinking of writing another book, or you probably have some stories?
Oh yeah, I should actually share with you all. I'm looking at writing a book, and I feel like I owe it to everyone, especially the people who are watching this right now, to write a book about the campaign and the stories and the trajectory, and try and recreate some of the incredible experiences and conversations I've had over the last number of months with the world. So I will say that I did not exactly take copious notes during the campaign. So like I'm going to have to really like dig through my calendar and just try and like mine stories and try and recreate it. But I'm excited to do this because I feel like I'm going to have to dig deep. And I feel like the story of the campaign is a really important one. And it exposes a lot about our political system, our democracy, the media, like a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to try and be as like blunt and truthful as I can, and I also want to be funny. Like, because a lot of funny shit happens, obviously, like on the trail when you're running for president. But the only way that you're going to really reach a broad audience is if it's not like broccoli, but it's like, like a fun journey. And so that's the goal. I'm looking at writing a book as soon as I have the bandwidth. I guess if we're all trapped indoors for months, I mean, that's not a terrible time to
Might be a good time to write. Yeah. Hey, so speaking of not just writing, but your podcast, when's the first episode gonna drop for the Yang Speaks?
Yeah, so before the coronavirus stuff, we were looking at late April. I don't know whether the timeline is going to be pushed back because of all this, like the fact that people aren't traveling or this or that. So we'll see, but we want to produce the first number of episodes as soon as we can. And it might take a little longer because apparently it's good practice to have a bunch of episodes in the can before you release the first. But we're targeting late April before, and certainly May at the latest.
Cool. Do you have time for one or two more?
Sure. At least I can do.
Wood Power wants to know, he's basically saying that Ari and I knocked Iowa, saw you in Cresco, WowCon, Des Moines, Chappelle, Nashua, drove all over. How can they help for Yang 2024? We're ready.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sure I know exactly who you are if I see you, because I remember all of those stops and appreciate the heck out of you. I'm definitely gearing up to run again in some form. 2024 is one big possibility. In terms of that energy right now, and it's one reason why I want to help get involved with local races. If we win a couple of local races, that could be enormous and awesome leading up to this time, because most of the other candidates have people that, frankly, they've worked with for years. So we can build that up in places around the country, particularly in places that are going to be influential in the presidential process. That would be tremendous. I think that would be the immediate goal, is help some other people win. And then with Humanity Forward, it's a little tougher to find those defined benchmarks. But right now, it's just trying to push out some relief. But after that, it's going to be back to some of these political races. And thank you so much for dropping everything and canvassing in Iowa and New Hampshire. I really appreciate it, and I hope you feel like your hard work and dedication paid off for the entire country. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, Andrew, I know that we promised to keep this to 30 to 40 minutes, and we're at minute 48. So I really appreciate you going along for us. And I just want to say, on behalf of everybody listening, we are so appreciative for you putting yourself out there for so many years and all the sacrifices that you and your family have made. And I got to say, on behalf of my sons, that it's so amazing that they were able to see someone that looks like them run for president. They don't realize how kind of huge of a deal it is. And that's what makes it so awesome, that they just think like, oh, anybody, you don't have to look a certain way to run for president. You just have to have good ideas and work hard. So I just want to say thank you so much. And we are ready to keep fighting for the same goals, because your ideas, if we like them in 2020, we're going to like them even more in 2024, and hopefully even sooner. That's right.
Well, thank you, Tom. I'm so glad that I could normalize and inspire normalize things and inspire your sons. I saw a picture and they look just like my boys, so I feel like we have a lot in common. And grateful to you, grateful to everyone watching for helping make the campaign such an incredible run. I mean, we really knocked everyone's socks off. People were like, what the heck is going on? And I'm happy to say I feel like that's continuing. Where after the campaign ended, I was a little bit like, well, what am I going to be or who am I going to be afterwards. But I have to say that the energy around our vision for the country is just growing. It is wild. You know, like I go anywhere and there's so much love among people that, you know, ordinarily just don't care about politics, like just like security guards and like train conductors back when, you know, you could ride a train. And it's all because of the people watching this, because of you, Tom, because you supported, donated, believed, canvassed, volunteered. It was awesome. It is awesome. And even now, no, like I feel like I'm one of like let's say the top 10 figures in the country that's one, most likely to become president of the United States in the future, but also two, can help arrest our crisis and decline and help move us in the right direction. It's an incredible responsibility, but you know, I'm really excited for the challenge, and I would not be anywhere near this without the folks on this call who've supported me. You know, that like you all are the vanguard of a group of hundreds of thousands of people around the country and the world that have helped make this work possible. So I'm delighted to spend time with you because I'm very, very appreciative.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, you know, I'm super optimistic. You know, even Russell Wilson, it took him a couple seasons to get to the Super Bowl. And the good news is you're a pretty young fella. So I think we've got a few more opportunities in front of us. And it's rare for a candidate to suspend their campaign and have their star shine even brighter. So I'm bullish on the Yang Gang all the way, baby.
Well, thank you, Tom. I'm bullish too, and I'm very, very grateful. Be safe out there, everyone. Hug your kids, and let's get through this together. Thank you so much, Tom. Nerds, doing it the first time. Thank you.
All right,
nerds.
We gotta say goodbye, nerds. Goodbye, nerds.
See you soon. Be safe
Peace.
out there.